There is always one man in every room who doesn't belong. Not because he's awkward, not because he's rejected, because he doesn't need what everyone else is begging for. Picture it, a coffee shop. While everyone else is scrolling, checking reactions, negotiating attention, couples are staging happiness, groups are trading gossip like currency, men are swiping, refreshing, chasing signals that tell them they still matter. And then there's him, sitting alone, unreadable, completely unbothered, not lonely, not disconnected, not waiting for anyone. He isn't trying to be seen. He isn't waiting for a message. He isn't performing. He could stand up and leave right now and lose nothing. And that makes him the most dangerous person in the room. Not because he's aggressive, because he doesn't need anything from anyone in that room. And Machiavelli understood something society still refuses to say out loud. A man who does not need approval cannot be controlled. A man who cannot be controlled becomes a problem. Look closer. Every system around you is built on dependence. Attention economies, social hierarchies, status games, fear of exclusion. They all assume one thing about you, that you need to belong. So what happens when a man removes himself from that contract? He doesn't chase, he doesn't explain, he doesn't negotiate his worth, and suddenly the room feels unstable. That discomfort you feel right now isn't accidental. It's the same discomfort societies feel when they encounter a man who cannot be pressured. That man doesn't argue with the system. He doesn't rebel loudly. He simply stops participating. And that silence destabilizes everything, because a man who doesn't need anyone cannot be controlled by shame, cannot be steered by fear, cannot be manipulated by rewards. This is why society labels him cold, calls him antisocial, paints him as broken, not because he is weak, because he is unreachable. And once you understand why that terrifies the world around you, you will never look at solitude, independence, or your own neediness the same way again. Listen closely. This is not about being alone. This is about becoming uncontrollable. Pay attention, because this is the kind of truth that makes you dangerous without ever raising your voice. Society does not collapse because of chaos. It collapses when too many men stop needing it. Machiavelli understood this with frightening clarity. He did not see power as something maintained by force first. He saw it as something maintained by dependence. Dependence on approval, dependence on reward, dependence on belonging. The moment a man no longer depends on these, the usual tools stop working. That is where the threat begins. Look closely at how every system around you is designed. Workplaces reward loyalty that looks like obedience. Social circles reward agreement disguised as harmony. Platforms reward visibility, validation, and constant signaling. None of this exists to make you strong. It exists to make you predictable. The man who doesn't need anyone breaks that equation. He doesn't respond the way he's supposed to. He doesn't react on schedule. He doesn't chase reassurance when pressure is applied. And pressure is always applied. Machiavelli wrote that men are governed more by fear of loss than hope of gain. That is not cynicism, that is observation. Most behavior is driven by the quiet terror of exclusion. Lose the job, lose the relationship, lose the group, lose relevance, lose status. That fear keeps people compliant. So what happens when a man removes that fear? When he no longer needs the promotion badly enough to compromise himself? When he no longer needs attention badly enough to perform? When he no longer needs belonging badly enough to dilute his position? He becomes hard to place. And anything that cannot be placed cannot be controlled. This is why independence is never celebrated honestly. It is praised in theory and punished in practice. Society loves the idea of strong individuals as long as they remain useful, agreeable, and emotionally accessible. The moment independence becomes real, it is reframed as arrogance, detachment, or dysfunction. Machiavelli warned that rulers fall when they misunderstand appearances. He knew that power survives by shaping perception. Label the threat, define it, contain it. That is exactly what happens to the self-sufficient man. He is not attacked directly. He is interpreted. He is not confronted openly. He is whispered about. He is not debated. He is sidelined. Because systems do not fight what they cannot dominate, they isolate it. Notice how often independence is pathologized. If a man prefers solitude, he is told something is wrong. If he doesn't overshare, he is told he lacks empathy. If he doesn't chase validation, he is told he is emotionally unavailable. These are not observations, they are corrections. Machiavelli understood correction as a subtler form of control than punishment. Correction teaches others what not to become. This is why the man who doesn't need anyone is always framed as an exception, a warning, a deviation, never a model. Because models spread. A man who stands alone calmly forces others to confront something uncomfortable. Their own dependence, their own fear of silence, their own addiction to external confirmation. That comparison destabilizes the group more than open rebellion ever could. Machiavelli wrote that men forget the death of a father sooner than the loss of property. The meaning is simple. What threatens security triggers retaliation. And nothing threatens a system built on need more than someone who removes himself from its incentives. This is why self-sufficiency invites testing. People will provoke him. They will withhold warmth. They will challenge him indirectly. They will push boundaries softly at first, not to defeat him, to measure him. They want to know if he will fold when connection is threatened, if he will chase when distance is introduced, if he will soften when approval is removed. Most men fail these tests without realizing they were tests at all. The man who doesn't need anyone doesn't respond the way the test requires. He doesn't rush. He doesn't explain. He doesn't negotiate for acceptance. And that creates unease, because now the pressure has nowhere to land. This is the first shift you must understand. Independence is not dangerous because it is loud. It is dangerous because it is silent. It removes leverage without announcing it. It breaks incentives without confrontation. Machiavelli believed the most effective power move is the one that forces others to adjust while you remain still. That is exactly what happens around a man who needs nothing. Conversations slow down around him. Behavior changes subtly. People choose words more carefully, not because he threatens, because he cannot be threatened. And once this dynamic is in motion, something irreversible begins. The man stops asking how to fit in. The system starts asking how to handle him. This is where the real tension begins to rise. Once a man stops needing anyone, the reactions around him become predictable. Not immediately, quietly. Because power never reveals itself through outrage first. It reveals itself through adjustment. People begin to behave differently around him without knowing why. They hesitate before speaking. They test with humor instead of confrontation. They frame demands as suggestions. They withdraw approval to see if he notices. This is not coincidence. This is calibration. Every social structure relies on leverage. Leverage is created by need. When need disappears, the structure searches for another entry point. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. He observed that men do not challenge strength directly. They probe for vulnerability, and when none appears, they change strategy. This is why the independent man is not attacked openly. He is tested indirectly. Silence is introduced to see if it unsettles him. Delay is used to see if impatience surfaces. Distance is applied to see if he chases. Most men fail here without realizing what just happened. They explain, they soften, they reach out. They reoffer themselves to the system they already escaped. And the moment they do, leverage returns. The man who doesn't need anyone does none of this. He lets silence stand. He lets delay exist. He lets distance reveal intent. This is not arrogance. This is discipline. Machiavelli wrote that men judge more by appearances than by reality. He understood that behavior under pressure is the appearance that decides status. When pressure is applied and nothing moves, the hierarchy shifts. People start adjusting themselves instead. This is why independence unsettles groups. Groups depend on reciprocity loops, approval exchanged for compliance, warmth exchanged for alignment, inclusion exchanged for obedience. The independent man breaks the loop by refusing the trade. He doesn't seek warmth. He doesn't negotiate belonging. He doesn't correct misinterpretations, and this creates a vacuum. In a vacuum, people project. Some assume arrogance. Some assume danger. Some assume superiority. None of that matters. What matters is that projection replaces control. When people project, they reveal themselves. When they reveal themselves, they lose position. This is where the advantage compounds. The independent man begins to see patterns others miss. He notices who becomes uneasy when he doesn't explain, who grows resentful when he doesn't seek reassurance, who attempts subtle dominance when approval is no longer currency. This is information. Machiavelli believed information asymmetry was the foundation of power. The man who sees more while revealing less always occupies the higher ground. That is what independence creates, not isolation, not superiority, clarity. And clarity sharpens instincts. You stop reacting emotionally to behavior because you understand the mechanism behind it. You stop personalizing tests because you recognize them as structural, not personal. The moment you stop taking things personally, you become difficult to move. This is where society's discomfort intensifies, because now you are not just independent, you are unresponsive to correction. Correction is how systems maintain shape. When someone cannot be corrected through shame, praise, fear, or exclusion, the system loses its grip. That is why the independent man is often framed as a problem, not because he causes chaos, but because he removes predictability. Predictability is the currency of control. Machiavelli warned that men fear uncertainty more than opposition. Opposition can be crushed. Uncertainty forces adaptation, and adaptation costs energy. This is why systems prefer compliant men to capable ones. Compliant men are cheaper to manage. The man who doesn't need anyone costs the system attention. It must watch him, interpret him, guess his motives. That alone shifts power, without raising his voice, without making demands, without declaring rebellion. He becomes the axis around which others adjust. And once you see this dynamic clearly, you understand something critical. Independence is not the absence of connection. It is the absence of leverage. When leverage disappears, the game changes. The next thing you'll notice is how quickly respect replaces pressure when pressure stops working. By now, you should recognize the shift. Pressure no longer comes at you directly. It comes disguised as concern, as curiosity, as just checking in. This is where the game becomes subtle. Once a man stops needing anyone, the system doesn't panic. It adapts. It tries a softer grip, because soft control is harder to detect than force. People start offering help you didn't ask for, advice you didn't request, guidance you didn't need, not to support you, to reinsert influence. This is the phase where most men give their power back voluntarily. They confuse attention with respect. They mistake involvement for care. They interpret intrusion as connection. Machiavelli warned against this exact weakness when he observed that men rarely see the change they accept willingly. Control is most effective when it feels helpful. The independent man recognizes this immediately. He doesn't reject people harshly. He doesn't argue. He doesn't justify. He simply remains unmoved. No over-communication, no emotional disclosure, no recalibration to meet expectations. And that restraint does something unsettling. It forces others to confront their own motives. Why does his distance bother me? Why do I need his response? Why does his silence feel heavy? Those questions don't get answered out loud. They turn inward. And when people turn inward unexpectedly, discomfort follows. This is why independence feels threatening. It doesn't dominate others. It mirrors them. And most people don't like what they see reflected. Machiavelli understood that men project their fears onto what they cannot control. When they cannot influence your behavior, they begin assigning intention to it. He must think he's better. He must be hiding something. He must be dangerous. None of this is true. But perception is enough. Perception governs behavior. And now the dynamic flips completely. Where others once tested you, they begin monitoring you. Where they once pressured you, they begin accommodating you. Where they once assumed access, they now ask indirectly. Not because you demanded respect, because you never signaled need. Need is the entry point for manipulation. Once that door closes, only two things remain: distance or respect. This is where many relationships quietly dissolve. Not through conflict, through misalignment. People who relied on your availability feel disoriented. People who benefited from your compliance feel exposed. People who assumed emotional access feel denied. They don't announce this loss. They adjust their behavior. Some withdraw. Some grow cold. Some become critical. This is not punishment. It is recalibration. Machiavelli observed that men abandon alliances when advantage disappears. Independence removes advantage for those who thrived on your dependence. And that is the cost. You lose people who only valued you when you were reachable. But what you gain is something far rarer: stability. Your mood stops fluctuating based on others' reactions. Your decisions stop bending to avoid discomfort. Your sense of self stops needing reinforcement. You become internally anchored. This is where independence stops being a lifestyle choice and becomes a position that others must navigate around. Because when a man cannot be influenced emotionally, negotiation changes, language softens, expectations shift, behavior adjusts, not out of fear, out of recognition. Machiavelli wrote that men respect strength when it cannot be shaken. Independence, when consistent, becomes that kind of strength. Quiet, unadvertised, unmovable. And now something important happens. You stop feeling like you're resisting the world. The world starts responding to you instead. That is the point where solitude is no longer a preference. It becomes leverage. When a man no longer needs anyone, society stops trying to pull him back in and starts trying to neutralize him. Not loudly, not violently, quietly. Because Machiavelli understood something most people miss. Power does not destroy what it cannot dominate. It contains it. This is why independent men are not attacked head-on. They are softened at the edges. They are framed. Their independence is rebranded as instability. Their restraint is misread as arrogance. Their silence is labeled a flaw. This is not misunderstanding. It is defense. A system built on need cannot afford visible examples of self-sufficiency. One man who needs nothing becomes proof that the incentives are optional. Proof is contagious, so the system does what it always does. It applies pressure through norms. You should be more social. You should explain yourself. You should open up. You should compromise. Notice the word, should. Machiavelli warned that obligation is the favorite tool of control. Once you accept what you should be, you surrender what you are. The man who doesn't need anyone refuses that trade. He does not rush to correct narratives about himself. He does not perform accessibility to reassure others. He does not dilute his position to be tolerated. And this refusal has a cost. Opportunities are offered conditionally. Access is gated by compliance. Warmth is exchanged for predictability. This is where most men fold. They decide it's easier to be included than to be sovereign. Easier to be liked than to be independent. Easier to belong than to stand apart. Machiavelli would call this the moment men choose comfort over power. He wrote that men willingly trade long-term advantage for immediate relief. That trade keeps hierarchies intact. The independent man does not make that trade. He accepts exclusion without resentment. He accepts misunderstanding without correction. He accepts distance without panic. Not because he enjoys it, because he understands it. Understanding is what hardens him. And now the final shift occurs. Those who once tried to influence him begin to respect the boundary they could not cross. Those who once tested him stop wasting effort. Those who once assumed leverage quietly withdraw. What remains are fewer connections, but stronger ones. Because relationships that survive independence are chosen, not required. Machiavelli believed alliances built on necessity are unstable. Alliances built on choice endure. The man who doesn't need anyone finally experiences this distinction clearly. He is no longer surrounded by people who benefit from his dependence. He is surrounded, if at all, by those who gain nothing from his weakness. That is real alignment. This is why society fears him. Not because he is violent, not because he is rebellious, but because he demonstrates an alternative. A man who cannot be coerced. A man who cannot be shamed. A man who cannot be starved of approval. Such a man forces institutions, groups, and individuals to confront their own reliance on control, and that confrontation is destabilizing. Machiavelli knew that power survives by remaining unquestioned. The independent man questions without speaking. His existence alone asks the most dangerous question of all. What if obedience is optional? Once that question is alive, the old structures weaken. That is why the man who doesn't need anyone is not just different, he is a threat. Not because of what he does, but because of what he no longer requires. This is where most people stop listening. Not because they disagree, because continuing would require change. If any part of this made you uncomfortable, pay attention to that reaction. Discomfort is not rejection, it is recognition. It means something here, touched a nerve you have been protecting. Men who are still dependent, scroll away. Men who are becoming independent, lean in. If you're still here, do one simple thing. Let the signal register. Like the video. Not for the algorithm, for yourself. It tells your mind this mattered. Share it with one person you already know. The one who keeps feeling pulled, pressured, managed, and doesn't understand why. You'll know exactly who that is. And if you want to keep going, subscribe. This channel isn't built for motivation. It's built for clarity, for leverage, for men who want to stop being predictable. But understand this, what you see here is surface level. These are the ideas that survive algorithms, policies, and public tolerance. The deeper material doesn't. The truths beneath this get buried, demonetized, or quietly removed. Not because they're false, but because they work too well. That's what the membership is for. Inside we go where I can't go publicly. Control dynamics, power psychology, the rules people use while pretending they don't exist. You don't join to feel better. You join to see clearly, to move differently, to stop being manageable. If you're ready for that, the button is there. Thank you for watching. You already know why this matters. I'll see you in the next video.